Joining us all the way from Japan. Shireen, you must be having a lot of bigwigs at that CII conference. First thoughts?
Well, the man of the moment is here, Lata, Mr. N.K. Singh, the chairman of the FRBM committee. The report which has just been made public, he is in Japan, and this is, of course, part of the India-Japan Investment Summit, where Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, etc., will also be here pitching the India story to Japanese investors. So I think we are going to be joined by Mr. Singh shortly. But, it's important to point out that this report was actually submitted to the government ahead of the budget, and the expectation was that some of the recommendations would be incorporated with the budget.
Shireen,
they chose not to make the report public, and they chose,
Shireen, if you can wait till Dr. Singh joins you, because Dr. Rangarajan has joined us, and we may not have his line for long. Okay, if Dr. Singh is with you, please go ahead.
Dr. Singh, can you hear me, sir? This is Shireen. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Hi, Shireen. How are you? All well?
I'm good. I'm good, sir. Just, we've been waiting for this report to be made public, and it's now been made public, sir. You're suggesting repealing the existing FRBM Act. You're also suggesting a 25 basis point year-on-year cut till FY23. Can you just take us very quickly through the rationale, the principle behind these recommendations, Mr. Singh? And overall, how confident do you feel about being able to achieve these targets, given the fact that we're now in a situation where state governments are announcing farm loan waivers, we're in a situation where state governments are talking about full-scale prohibition, etc., and the impact on revenue?
So I think that the report must be seen as an integrated work, which involves several strands of thought. The first and foremost of moving over from a fiscal deficit-centric anchor to debt as a principal anchor, and using fiscal deficit as the operational target. We have also projected that based on various regression analysis and best international examples, the optimum debt to GDP target for India should be around 60%, 40% for the central government and 20% for the states. We have projected that if we continue with a 3% fiscal deficit for the next few years, and then going down further, then by 2023, the country would be able to achieve the desired optimum 60% debt to GDP ratio. So, in terms of this is the glide path for achieving the preferred debt to GDP target. There are several components in this because there is a robust chapter in regard to state governments, and as you said, that deserves a fuller treatment because of late there has been some deterioration in regard to the state finances, and therefore that will deserve a separate attention. Also, I think that in terms of the overall institutional framework, we have suggested the constitution of a fiscal council based on best international practice, which is now being followed by many countries, and that the resorting to the trigger provisions of the escape clause, which has been capped at 0.5% of GDP, based on certain circumstances, which the report has pointed out, whereas it would be the government's decision, it would be useful if the advice of the independent fiscal council can also be taken. So these are the broad parameters and the broad overall architecture of the report. The report is in 4 volumes. The volume 1 contains the main report. There is a robust volume on best international practice, on the papers submitted to the committee by the International Monetary Fund, the OECD, the World Bank, and the EU, and some other international organizations. There is one on domain knowledge experts, which contributions made by experts have been put out in a separate volume. And there is, of course, the center and the states, the presentations made to us by central government and the state government. So that's the broad framework, Shireen.
I know you're in the middle of a meeting, sir, so I'm going to just request you to give us a couple of more minutes. You talked about how there's an entire chapter dedicated to states, and you talked about some of the concerns that you have with respect to the fiscal position. In light of the recent events, have you had any conversation with the finance minister, with officials in the North Bloc? Because you submitted your report even before the budget, sir. The recommendations were not acted upon then. But do you believe has there been any feedback on whether the government is going to act on the recommendations made?
No,
and how soon?
We have submitted the report. The finance minister was generous enough to devote several paragraphs in his budget to the broad framework of this report. The gist of the report is contained in his budget speech itself. In regard to many other recommendations which this report contains, now that it is the public domain, we hope that there would be more further analytical work. There will be comments, and based on all these kinds of things, government would be in a position to take the further steps on regard to the other features of the FRBM report, those which were not mentioned in the budget speech. A formal decision also needs to be taken on the glide path itself, although he did say that next year government is committed to accepting 3% fiscal deficit, going down from 3.2% this year, and thereafter, of course, on the trajectory which will enable the debt to GDP ratio to be achieved.
Okay. Dr. Singh, I just wanted to know if you are privy to any information on whether it will be ready as a new act in the next session of Parliament. Were you given to understand that the government will act upon it with that urgency?
Well, actually, in the report, since now it's been made public, the new draft legislation, namely the debt and fiscal responsibility legislation, and the new debt fiscal rules have also been worked out and are part of the report for the government's consideration. These have been done by consultation with the legal firm, and it is for the government now to take a view on whether they would like to repeal the existing FRBM legislation and substitute it, and if so, in which form, the two other legislations which we have proposed in the report.
Very clearly, sir, the Fiscal Council is the fulcrum of your report to ensure independence. How have you advised or recommended its independence?
Not only the Fiscal Council, in the sense that the Fiscal Council, the key role is to do analytical work in regard to key fiscal parameters, behavior, to keep government periodically informed and to act as in an advisory way, but also in regard to the advice being obtained. It is for government to accept or not accept the advice being obtained in regard to the invocation of the escape clauses. So, yes, the Fiscal Council is an important institutional measure. It's an important firewalling in terms of circumscribing the flexibility in an unfettered way of invoking the escape clause, and it lays down much greater transparency in the working of the entire new fiscal regime which this report has proposed.
Mr. Singh, just a quick word as far as the escape clauses are concerned. Just a final question, sir, on the escape clause, Mr. Singh. Could we expect even an event, for instance, like the goods and services tax, where we don't know what the impact will be in the first year of its rollout, to perhaps, to perhaps force the government to exercise the escape clause? Would that fit in the consideration as per your recommendations?
What we have said, far-reaching structural measures which have unintended revenue consequences are the words which we have used in the report, and it is now for the government to interpret what they regard as far-reaching structural changes which unintended revenue consequences. We have not specified any particular event which would qualify for this particular invocation of this clause. Okay, Shireen. Right. Bye.
Mr. Singh, thank you very much for your time, sir. Thanks very much. Appreciate you joining us.